Well, welcome back to a Trek Zone Conversation. Matt Miller with you in Studio 4. Once again, joined by Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Rob, we're going to continue talking about Axanar. That was Prelude in the last one. The link in the video description and that little card that we do on YouTube. For podcast listeners, it is, of course, on the website. But welcome back, my friend. Let's jump now into the rest of the Axanar journey for you, shall we?
Oh, my God. I don't know. Am I ready?
This is a Trek Zone Conversation. And you can get exclusive behind-the-scenes info and first-play access to all Trek Zone podcasts by becoming a member today. Click join on every Trek Zone video on YouTube. Go to thetrek.zone/support or scan the QR code on screen throughout the show.
So let's fast forward a little bit now to... Some people have left, plans have been changing, moving into a studio space, into a warehouse in Valencia, crowdfunding some more money. There's some dollar signs and some lofty ideas coming along. Christian Gossett leaves, a few other people leave. What are you sort of feeling at this point with Aries Studios, with Axanar Productions, as it's going forward just before the lawsuit ends?
Well, okay. I was pretty excited, to be honest, about all this stuff, because to me, at the time, I was also working on other things. I was editing a movie called Paradox, a low-budget sci-fi film. So I had other things going on outside of Axanar. But look, to be honest, I love the idea of having an independent studio facility, because I'd worked at a company called Full Moon Entertainment. And in my own mind, what I'd always wanted to do is do what Full Moon did. We had a facility, we had everything under one roof, and we were making a movie a month that Paramount was releasing. So I thought that that's what we were going to do. And I figured, okay, we're going to crowdfund Axanar. I had no idea. We made so much money. It was unbelievable to me how much money. But I figured, great, so let's go do what we're going to do. We already have the team in place. We have everybody that knows what they're doing. So let's just go do it. And it started to sort of fall apart. Now, here's the big mistake. My big regret in this whole project was I just assumed that everybody involved would feel the same way. Like, to me, it's the end product that we're all working towards. And Prelude to Axanar was a really good end product. It was a great beginning. So we proved we could do it. So what we're going to do next is make it bigger and better. We already have the people we know that can make it. We're going to do a feature. What I should have paid more attention to is Alec Peters, who now controlled all of this money came in. What should have happened was he shouldn't have controlled the money, because the money was the project's money. It should have been put in an escrow account. We should have had a production accountant control the money. But money changes everything. And then Alec wanted to get rid of the people that actually produced Prelude. Christian's people like Jennifer Weberly. Let's start to get rid of those people. So Alec systematically started to dismantle the people that, everyone that made Prelude, he got rid of that team. And that should have been, I should have been like, well, that's dumb, and left. I mean, I just should have left. But I love the idea of having a studio. And I thought, well, if we had this facility, that I would be able to bring in movies, that would pay for the studio, because the studio, you have to keep making stuff that were not Star Trek related. I had an office there. I love working there. And that's what I thought we were going to do, was we would eventually retrofit. It's like a lot of low budget. At Full Moon, we had warehouses. And then as you made things, you made more money, and you, like what Peter Jackson did in Wellington, you build stuff out as you make movies that pay for this stuff. And then eventually you retrofit your warehouse into a studio. You keep adding things, or you turn it into a place where you can make movies. And that's what I thought we were going to do. And I had even brought in a company, Bexel, this company that wanted to retrofit the whole studio and put millions of dollars into the facility and turn it into a place where we could do live broadcasts, which would have been amazing. And then Alex said I had no authority and took that away from me. and the Bexel deal never happened. They had blueprinted out the studio. They had put so much time and effort into turning the studio into something, and it would have been the kind of thing where we would have controlled this studio, and it would have been a beautiful facility, and we could have made anything there. And I never understood, like, to me, it's all about the finished product. The work is what is the locomotive that pulls your caboose down the tracks. And all anybody cares about, nobody cares about you. You know, the cult of personality, they care about the work you've done. They become fans of yours because of the work. The only reason people liked Axanar is because of Prelude to Axanar. And people were like, wow, you guys have a really good idea. And people loved Prelude. That was it. They liked Prelude to Axanar. That was all that we had done. So, as anyone knows, what our job was, if we're going to make more money, and we made a lot more money, was just to follow up Prelude to Axanar. That's all anybody cared about. Nobody cared about us. Nobody cared about, they just wanted to see more of Prelude, more of that. Mm. And that was something that I just assumed somebody like Alec Peters would understand. Like, bruh, we got to make more of this. Nobody cares about us. Nobody cares about posters or perks or podcasts. And I understood. I felt like, okay, we have an audience that we're going to support. And I did that. I'm like doing all kinds of podcasts with Alec. But I knew better. And my big regret is that I should have said, like, we got to shut the fuck up and go make this movie. That's what we have to, that's all anybody, to this day, that's all anyone ever cares about, is seeing, what are you going to do? And Prelude made a promise to our audience. They gave us $100,000. We made Prelude. They gave us hundreds of thousands of more dollars, expecting more Prelude. That's what they want, or the feature film version of it. That's it. That's all we had to deliver. And I came on board in October of 2015 to work on it full time after Christian had left. And we were ready to go. I mean, Dean was building sets, costumes were being made, everything was being moved forward. But then, I mean, I'll flat out say it. Alec Peters wanted to be the king. He wanted to be the guy who ran all this, and he wanted the adulation of everyone. The problem is, nobody cares about who's running the thing. They care about the work that you're doing. Anyone who works in movies or Hollywood or anything, it's all about the work. And no one gets in their own way more than Alec Peters does. No one. and because he doesn't know anything about film production. He doesn't know, and it was really problematic. And as we were moving forward, he just, and you look, the fact that it is now 2021, it is 7 years. 7 years and 3 or 4 months since Prelude to Axanar came out. And the only other finished piece of Axanar was the Vulcan scene that I shot in an afternoon in a parking lot with one 20-foot green screen piece, a 20 by, so it was 20 foot by 20 foot. That was designed as a proof of concept. We built a giant green screen in order to reshoot that. Even the actress, Kim Fitzgerald, the actress we'd cast to play that Vulcan, to play Talera, she had strep throat. And so we'd already planned the shoot. So Kim, I called her at 9 o'clock at night. I called her. I said, listen, I can you be on set at 6 a.m. in 9 hours from now? And she's like, what? I said, I need you to play a Vulcan master. You know, you need to play Soval's wife. She's like, who's Soval? She's never seen Enterprise, you know, and so, because we had to shoot this thing. And I thought for what I threw her into, I said, you're going to have to get made up in the morning. I mean, she hadn't even read the script. She didn't know what the hell I was doing.
Wow. And
that was how the Vulcan scene was done. And it was done with one square 20-foot green screen, which is not, and I was like, we planned it well, we executed it well, but it was something that was only done as a proof of concept that was always designed to be shot. I'm really proud of the Vulcan scene, but it was a proof of concept. It was something that we were going to show to use to crowdfund more about. And I even said it. I said, look, we've shown people what people against a green screen sitting in chairs will look like. But what kind of movie will we make when people are supposed to be walking through Star Trek environments? So I worked with Tobias Richter because we had to figure out, like, where's the sun going to be? Because we were shooting in natural sunlight. And Milton Santiago, our DP, here's one of my favorite things is he brings up our his own cameras, and we have our 2 costumes, and we're out in the parking lot, and we're seeing how the sunlight is how it's shimmering off the costumes, and Milton is shooting them, deciding which camera are we going to use, the Arri or the Red. And Alec comes out and goes, "What are you guys doing?" And I'm like, "Oh man, we're doing some camera tests. We want to see what looks better, which camera has more detail." And he's like, "Why?" Man, I should have known then. Like, why? Like, we're doing the work we need to do because we're going to shoot this against. It was just typical. But yeah, and then of course during this whole time, and if I can say this on the record, Alec Peters promised me $3,000 a month. That was my salary because that basically covered my rent and my gas and my power bill and all that for the duration starting in October of 2015 throughout 2016. That's what I was going to be paid. And I was paid for a couple months, and then he couldn't pay me anymore. And this idea, he's like, "You stole money from donors." Well, I didn't have access to your bank accounts. I worked for you for 3.5 years on this project. I ask you, Alec Peters, how much money did you pay me to edit Prelude? How much money did you pay me to do the 45-minute documentary or to produce the DVDs or any of the work I did? Did you pay me anything at all? Or did I just steal money from you? I've always wanted to ask him that.
And how do you steal money when, as you say, you don't have access to those bank accounts?
No,
So
no,
that's
and even equipment. Let me also say for the record, when Alec Peters left California, the only thing he ever asked me to give him was the matte painting that I had hanging in my office. That was his. And when I resigned from the project, I thought that we should have made. I was working, I had effects, I had 87 effect or 88 effect shots. I said, look, we should make the first 30 minutes of our feature film that we were going to make. We had been casting. We had all the equipment. We had all the design work. I was already working on everything. We should have made the first 30 minutes of the movie. We had a meeting about it. And I'm like, that's all we need to do. We can say, look, we'd have to crowdfund. We were sued. We can give you 30 minutes of a feature film that you're going to see what a feature film would look like. And we would have been able to do it. We would have been able to shoot it in the studio with the sets as they were and all the Klingon set pieces Dean had built with Richard Hatch, with all that stuff. We could have done it. And Alec's like, no, because then we won't be able to show the Battle of Axanar. And I'm like, oh, we don't have any elements for the Battle of Axanar. We don't have any of that stuff. What we've got is we've got the stuff on hand to make the first 30 minutes or maybe the first 45 minutes of the Axanar feature. We should have done it. We should have done it. Back after the lawsuit was settled, we could have done it within a month and we could have finished it, 5 months later. It would have been done. And people would have said, and who knows, if we'd had it done, maybe Paramount would have said, you know what? You should make the rest of it. Maybe they wouldn't have. That's a pipe dream I would have had, but my dream would be like, oh, it'd be so good. The donors paid for the money. Maybe we should be able to, of course, was the money there to even do that? Probably not. But
no one
we
will
had
know.
enough material. Yeah, we had enough material. We'd done the work. Dean's sets were beautiful. And by the way, they still were never finished. The bridge was never finished. I look at the bridge now, to me, it looks like half a set because we were going to do all kinds of art direction to make it look like it was real. And also I looked at where Alec, he wants to shoot at in a school, in a public school. And I don't think he realizes that the way Prelude was shot, they really can't do it. They don't have enough green screen there. They'd still have to bring in other green screen and a bunch of other lights to even do what we did in Prelude. But he doesn't know any of that, so he doesn't know what he doesn't know. So, it's really interesting to hear their director of photography talk about, we're going to make it look just like Prelude. And I'm like, none of the people that worked on Prelude are going to be working on it, so how are you going to do that?
Mm.
You know, is Tommy Kraft going to do your backgrounds? Sure.
Is
Okay.
Milton Santiago going to come back as the DP?
Yeah,
Christian
no.
Gossett as the director? Rob
No, I
Burnett
mean,
as the editor?
it's really, no, I mean, we're not. It's too bad. But I just
Mm.
find it interesting, like 7 years later, two 15-minute shorts. I would say that because you're shooting all that stuff at the same time, they should have been done in 5.5 months.
Yeah.
You know, when after the lawsuit, 5.5 months.
So, Rob, you know, as you say, we're 7 years down the track. You've moved on from Axanar, and we're sort of getting there, jumping back a little bit to when you were part of Axanar. You mentioned in the first part of our chat that we were there. You know, I've been trying to get you on the show for so many years. One of the biggest things was that we certainly clashed on social media. And I think at one point I
Yes.
called you a wannabe Star Trek director because all you were doing were the behind the scenes stuff. Those things, by the way, in all honesty, beautiful stuff, beautiful additions to the Blu-ray. Look,
Thanks.
I think the biggest thing out of all of this is that Axanar draws out the emotions of everybody. There's comments that have been raised. There were things said in the AXA Monitor Facebook groups about, you know, you and all this sort of stuff and how you could stick by it and all this sort of stuff. At the end of the day, Alec not only is the great destroyer of friendships, he's the great bringer together of people from two different sides of the world.
What I didn't understand is that I just assumed, because I worked in independent film for so long, that making movies is the end goal. I mean, to me, it's you got to get the project finished.
Yeah.
Talk is cheap. And in Hollywood, everyone talks and talks and talks. And after the lawsuit, all we had to do is make two 15-minute shorts because that's all we needed to do. Well, we had everything we needed to make two great 15-minute shorts. We could have just done them. I mean, I was even designing like that's why I wanted to go back and make the first 30 minutes of the movie, which is two 15-minute bits, because I mean, we built that giant green screen we had built. I was going to use that for the opening scene where Karn and Chang were on this planet talking, this conquered Federation colony, and the way we were going to shoot it. I'd figured out how to do all of this, and I just wanted to make the movie, you know, and it was frustrating to not be able to do that. Like the Vulcan scene, like even if we weren't able to me, the Vulcan scene it's fine. But if we had to use it, we could have. Like if I would stand by that work and say we could absolutely put that into the movie. If you took that as 3 minutes of the film, well, now we only have to make 12 more minutes of 15 minutes or 27 minutes of 30. That was an asset we'd already created. And we already had all this other stuff. We had Klingon bridge pieces. We had the big bridge that we had built. Alec had bought stuff from, what's the Orson Scott, Ender's Game, the movie. So we were going to use those set pieces to be part of Starfleet headquarters on Earth because we were going to use the green screen there for that. So there was a lot of stuff that we were going to make, and we could have just done it. And we didn't even need a ton of money. And it was frustrating to not. I mean, you know, Alec didn't even know. We even shot a music video up there that he had no idea about. And because he was never there. He would roll in for a couple hours and then leave. I mean, I ended up, Tango Shalom, that's in theaters now, I cut a Lifetime movie in Aries Studios, a movie called I Know Where Lizzie Is. Not a great film, but I cut it up there. I was up there 7 days a week working, doing something. And whether it was working on Axanar or making some money by editing something or doing anything or trying to get a company to come up and rent the place or whatever, you know, it was something. We should never have been in a position where we didn't finish something. And to me, I resigned officially at the beginning of November 2017. So it's almost been 4 years since I've not been involved in Axanar. And I even said, I resigned. Alec and my visions didn't work out anymore. And I would have just shut up, you know, and then suddenly He's dragging me on social media. He took 2 legal actions against me that cost me tens of thousands of dollars defending myself, which to me, you know what? He talks about loyalty. That guy's not loyal. I stood by him during the entire legal process. I was there. I was a witness for him. I sat there and busted my ass. And I'm like, the problem with Alec is if you're not going to do what he wants you to do, and like he just expects you to do all this work for him, then he turns on you. And I'm like, I gave you years of my life, dude. I finished everything that ever came out of the Axanar project, aside from the very first Ask video that got you the initial Prelude money. Nothing came out of Axanar that was finished that I didn't do. And I ask you, Alec, how much was that worth to you? How much did I get paid for all that? You paid yourself, as you said, $38,000 a year. Well, I did 10 times the work you did on Axanar. How much was I paid?
A very interesting question. So you leave, taking with you these things. There was a supposedly a thing about some hard drives that went missing that were given back to Alec or something like that. Things, so many petty things when Alec breaks up with someone that it is just incredible. And what I love is that it has to be Alec, because he's the common denominator of every story that I've heard on Trek Zone about people that have left, from Christian to Dean to Paul to you to Stephen Mayhew, one of his adamant supporters. It all boils down to Alec's attitude and his cult-like personality that, as you said, if you're not with me, you're against me. And just an incredible thing. And as you say, tens of thousands of dollars to defend yourself in lawsuits that he brought against you in jurisdictions where you don't live. Nothing was filed in California.
No, he filed against me in Georgia. I mean, he does these things specifically to hurt people. I mean, he knows I live with my girlfriend and her 2 daughters. It's not like we're wealthy. And he costs money because he wants to hurt you, because he's hoping to get a judgment against you so he can get money from you later. He's never worked a day in his life. I've never seen Alec put in a day's work ever. He never, ever put in a solid day's work on the entirety of the Axanar project. And it's interesting. I mean, he can say, he says he does all these things. I put all this money and all. I'm like, when? When did you do any of that, dude? Like, I know what I've done because I made it. Like, you can't tell me I didn't, because I did. And, he's even like, well, you didn't finish the Axanar Origins disc. And I'm like, well, that's because we didn't make Axanar. Like, the Origins disc, by the way, that I came up with and I had written the proposal and all this stuff, we didn't get to make any of that. So I made my own Axanar Origins pieces, which you can watch on YouTube, my YouTube channel, and it's such a weird thing. I mean, the funny thing is I don't hate Alec Peters. I think that unfortunately he's a guy that unfortunately he doesn't know the joy of actually finishing something on his own and making something that he can really, like, deep down inside, he knows that he made that. Because the great thing about Prelude is that Christian can look at it, I can look at it, the actors can look at it. We can all go, we can identify what we did on Prelude to Axanar. I certainly know all the work I did on it. I know all how I did all the editing, and I know what I've done. So I look back on it with great pleasure, and it was the process of making it that was exciting. All Alec wants is adulation, because he's never actually done any real work. He hires people to do work, and then he wants to take credit for it, but he doesn't feel it inside because he didn't actually do the work. So there is no satisfaction. Any artist who paints a picture, you might not be satisfied with the finished work, but an artist loves the process. If you're a painter, you love painting a picture. If you're a choreographer, you love choreographing a musical. For me, I love editing a film. What's interesting, too, about the hard drive thing that he talks about, me stealing hard drives, what's really interesting about that is the company that makes those hard drives, I've been in contact with the head of that company the whole time. And those drives that he accused me of stealing were brought in by Bing Bailey. our colorist, and he gave me 2 sets of drives, and he took 2 sets of drives. That company has a big credit. Their logo is on the end of Tango Shalom, the movie that I have in theaters now. And that company that provided those hard drives have their logo on a movie that's playing in theaters that opens in Russia on November 4th and drops on VOD on October 29th. So I ask you, Alec, one more time. One thing I did, you didn't. So, what are you going to do?
And one of the biggest responses too is that, well, these guys are just filled with hatred. They hate Alec. They don't like the way that he's done things and, whatever else. And yeah, I mean, you said it then that you don't hate Alec. My response to that really is, well, hang on, let's have a look at the number of people that have come on Trek Zone and said basically exactly the same thing about their time with Axanar. A desire to make a film that should have been made years ago, and it's still not being made, and we're still finding locations to make this film. It's just incredible. Rob, when you look at, say, Paul Jenkins from Meta Studios coming on to Axanar, with the purest of intentions to get this thing made and get Alec out of the rut, and he bloody gave it a red hot crack, but he still ran into the same problems. How does that make you feel? Like looking at Paul's journey through Axanar, how does that make you feel?
Well, it's funny, here in my Robservatory, I have Paul Jenkins' work on my shelf. I have his Eisner Award-winning work on my shelf here. And
very cool.
I got to meet Paul and talk to him. I had known Paul about 20 years ago. He was a mutual friend of another friend. And I got to meet him, and I had the utmost respect for him. So I'm like, great. And Paul, his intentions are true. But it was the same thing. He had his whole production team and brought them in the same way that Christian did and all that. And Paul tried to do something, tried to make something good. And I know exactly what he ran into. And it's interesting to me because it's really not that hard to get a movie made. And the funny thing is I'd be like, Alec, in 2014, we did it. And the question is, what is the difference between what was going on in 2014 and what's going in? It's 2021. I mean, I would have gone through junior high and high school and graduated and been on my way to college in the time it's been since we made Prelude to right now. I would have gone through a huge shift. I would have been 13, then I would have been 18 and going to college.
Yeah.
And Axanar, 2 15-minute shorts. I mean, what? And it's really, it is a very sad state of affairs.
I just have to look at Perth filmmaker Aaron Vanderklay, who made 5 Enterprise-era fan films in his parents' garage, and now he's moved on to his second Voyager-era fan film in his parents' garage in the time that Alec has not produced anything following Prelude to Axanar.
And the question is, I mean, I think the real question ultimately is, well, why not? The only question anybody should ever ask is, why has Alec Peters not been able to produce 2 15-minute fan films in 7 years when he produced or was part of the production team that made Prelude from crowdfunding soup to nuts in 5.5 months?
Yeah.
That's the only question to ask. I don't care if you were sued by CBS. That has nothing to do with why you didn't make a fan film. Making a movie has nothing to do with anything else outside of all of that. And if you put so much money into the movie, Prelude only cost $100,000. Where is it? I put $200,000 into. No, you didn't. If you did, then we would have more to show for it. I mean, the Vulcan scene basically cost $13,000, really, to shoot. And if you think about it, that's 3 minutes long. So for $100,000, you should have a movie done. And that's all that anybody cares about. Now, I think, does anybody really care except the people that are, hanging on? I would dare say that Axanar should never be made now, because the people that were involved are not involved anymore. Kate Vernon, Gary Graham, Richard Hatch is dead. I mean, why even bother? And to what end? You know what the funny thing is? What Alec doesn't yet realize is even if Francis Ford Coppola came back and directed the next 15-minute segments of Axanar, they wouldn't be as good as Prelude. They wouldn't. You wouldn't have the star power. You wouldn't have Tony Todd. You wouldn't have anybody. And it even like I got to give Jonathan Lane credit for making an Axanar fan film part of the universe. I have come to despise Jonathan Lane. I have called him many times a quisling turncoat who has stood by for his own dreams of fan film glory when he knows that Alec Peters was going out and hurting people that made the very thing that I call him a quisling. He is one. And Jonathan Lane is, to me, the worst kind of human being because he knew what Alec was doing to the very people that made the movie he wanted to be a part of so much. And yet he still's like, I'm going to go make one anyway. He has no integrity. He is one of the worst kind of people, the worst kind of fans. And Jonathan, I mean this sincerely. And if you want to talk about it, I'm happy to meet with you and go to lunch with you and tell you why I think you're such an awful person. Because you stood by and allowed him to abuse people, knowing full well he was doing so. And you know what? It was just another part of Alec's sycophantic adulation he gets from people because everyone's so desperate. People don't realize it's got to be the process. You know, you finish the work. There is no glory to be found in making fan films. There is glory to be found in making and doing the work and creating something that people enjoy. And you let it go and you move on to the next thing. But I mean, Axanar became this toxic, horrible, awful thing that really hurt all the people that made Prelude, that really worked on it, have been hurt by Alec Peters to one degree or another. That and I find, you know what, the behavior that Alec has engaged in has been nothing less than criminal. And he has hurt virtually every key player in the Axanar what do you want to call it? Odyssey? Debacle?
Debauchery?
Yeah, all of it. And it's too bad. I mean, my God, who would have thought a Star Trek fan film would turn into something like this? And at the end of the day, I might even, the fact that he still hasn't made 2 15-minute shorts for all the horrible shit he's done to people, there's still no movies. Like, I'm like, why did you engage in lawsuits with people if you haven't made your movies? Like all the money you paid for, or you couldn't use that to make whatever movie you wanted to make? You'd rather sue people? You let Jonathan Lane make a fan film and you haven't made 2 15-minute shorts? I mean, quisling turncoat Jonathan Lane got to make his fan film, and you, Alec Peters, still haven't made Axanar? My God, what a numbnuts you truly are. I mean, if anybody wanted to know how just worthless and incompetent and just what a disappointment a human being can be, look at Alec Peters. Even now, if he finally gets to make these movies, I'm like, oh, great. So we're supposed to be like terrific. I'm sure what you're going to make is going to be wonderful.
And he's too afraid to come back to Trek Zone because I interview people like yourself, like Dean Newberry, Stephen Mayhew, and others like that. And one thing that I wanted to jump in on there as well is, you know, for all the for the shit person that, say, someone like Harvey Weinstein is, he still made films. As shit as that person is, he made films.
Oh, and by the way, I would like to extend, just to be clear, I am happy to talk to Jonathan Lane or Alec Peters on my live show. I promise to be polite. I promise to give you can say whatever you want. But I dare you, Alec Peters. I will throw down the gauntlet. Come on to Robservations. I did my 750th show tonight, celebrating William Shatner's journey to the edge of space with Jeff Bezos on his Blue Origin rocket. You know, I mean, my God, Blue Origin, they were able to put William Shatner into space during the time it took you to not make Axanar.
Yes.
So
The whole space tourism
But
industry was founded, developed, created, launched into space on demo flights, and then put people into orbit in the time that it took Alec to do nothing.
yeah, to
There
do
are,
nothing. And
there are
and
so many
and
of these
I'm like,
analogies.
and I would say, Alec, you know what? Happy to have you on. You can accuse me of anything. You can say anything you want about me on my show. Happy to discuss it with you. Come on, whatever you want, Alec. You know why you won't? Because you, my friend, are a coward of the first order. A coward. So I ask you now, come on the show. You should be on Matt's show too. Come on. Do our shows. How about we all three do a show together?
That
Why
would be
not?
brilliant. That would be brilliant. It would be amazing. It would
I'd
be
love it.
amazing internet television, Rob.
He won't, because the thing about Alec is he doesn't actually know the answers to these things.
Mm.
Like if you were to, like, there's things about, I'm sure if he ever watched my Axonar Origins discs or the actual documentaries I did, I'm sure there's things in there that he doesn't even know. Like, that's the funny thing, is to get him live on a show and literally ask him specifics about filmmaking. There are things he'd be like, oh, I don't know. And that would be the funny thing. So,
Well, Rob, I reckon that
what
is
can
the
you do?
perfect place to wrap up our chat about your time on Axonar. Yourself in general, I really appreciate your time over the last couple of episodes of A Trek Zone Conversation. Certainly a fascinating insight indeed into the life of working for Alec. You're not alone in what you're saying. There are so many episodes here on Trek Zone detailing all of these accounts, and they are very, very similar. So, Rob, I really appreciate your time, and thanks for having a Trek Zone Conversation.
Well, it was great. Thanks for having me, Matt. You know, the one thing I would say, though, is Prelude is a great piece of work. A lot of people put a lot of great time and effort into that. And I still think that Prelude to Axonar does stand as a shining example of what fan films can be.
Absolutely, Rob. Well, again, thanks for your time. And people should go and check out Prelude to Axonar. Don't donate any money to Alec, though.
No.